first year and a half was very painful. I didn't think about growth. I actually thought about team and culture. After that year and a half, one day I finally made the decision, this is not working. I ended up replacing 95% of the team. It was a very painful decision. When I had this new team with this new culture already, that's when things started going the right trajectory.
Hey guys, I'm out here trying to find good guests to bring you tons of value. And I think I got another one today. Founders want to hear from other founders. So I've got Ashish Gupta, multiple time founder, CEO, and currently running scaleupexec.com. He's going to talk to us about some of the major lessons that he's learned starting and selling multiple companies over the years. And hopefully, if you're listening right now and feeling stuck as a founder or CEO, this will bring you some good news. So welcome to the show, Ashish.
Thank you so much, Lee, for having me here. Happy to have this conversation.
Yeah, this is exciting. I love talking to other founders and hearing their stories, their journeys to how they got to where they are, especially those who have been through multiple companies, because usually you've learned quite a bit, right? So let's start with just talking about your background. I want you to kind of give us a timeline from wherever you'd like to start up to current day. And I know you want to talk a little bit about a company that you sold back prior to your last exit. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I originally got started and spent much of my career in the tech industry. First company that I co-founded, it was a wireless company. It actually developed some of the early technology for what you see in cell phones now for charging phones wirelessly. And it was one of those starting in the garage type stories, where it was myself and a college friend of mine. We had no money. We had this bold idea, and the technology to develop it was crazy difficult to send power through the air. It was very difficult. Eventually, after really trying hard, we finally came up with a really fascinating technology. And then eventually I started building a product out of it, and then eventually started to do business development and sell that technology to different potential customers. And then eventually we got to the phase where the company, it actually became a real company, and we had raised money and we were making traction. We're generating revenue and we're getting close to launching our product. And we realized to get to the next level, it was either a good time to exit to somebody who can really take our technology to the next level, or find some kind of good partner to help us. And that's when we eventually got in touch with Qualcomm. They liked our technology, and Qualcomm is a Fortune 500 company that's in the semiconductor and IP, wireless IP space. And so they eventually acquired our company, and that was quite fascinating. I was 25 years old when it got acquired, and it was like a dream come true, when you're early on in your life and career. And this was, by the way, after probably 20 or 30 times during that process of developing this technology and productizing it, of feeling that, okay, this is impossible. This problem we're facing at this moment is impossible to cross over. And I don't know if we're going to be able to keep our company sustaining. So whether that was a financial problem, whether that was a lot of times it was technical problems. There's so many difficulties through all of that. But one by one, we were able to tackle everything. We kind of had this very optimistic, positive mindset. And that maybe helped us, especially when you're young and a bit naive. You don't actually know too much, but sometimes that serves as a benefit when you come across all kinds of different challenges. So after that company was acquired, I had to work at Qualcomm for a couple of years. And then I had the chance thereafter to join Apple, and I was in management in their iPhone manufacturing team, and oversaw a pretty sizable $2 billion a year budget and a pretty sizable team across the world that was tasked with how to not spend $2 billion a year in the manufacturing of iPhones. And it was quite fascinating because in those 5 years I was at Apple, it's a company that has really developed a deep culture that permeates through everybody in the company, from management level to individual contributor level. And you can see that in how people think and how they act and make decisions. And learned a lot about building teams and cultures and efficient organizations, and how to really think through optimizing every part of any process that you're working on. My team was really an optimization team. So it was kind of fascinating to learn all about that and to actually implement it and see the type of results that you can bring on such a massive scale as iPhone scale. iPhone is probably the biggest product in the world in many different metrics. Right. And eventually I realized that I started getting very comfortable there. I remember I had a meeting with one of the big bosses, and she said, well, here's what your next 5 years looks like at Apple. And for most people, they'd be like, whoa, that's amazing. But as soon as I heard that, I lost all interest, because somehow in life for me, I like to have some unknown and some adventure. Mm-hmm. And once you know what your future looks like, some of that, the prospect of learning or the prospect of self-evolution, it somehow diminishes, at least in my mindset. So that's when I started thinking, what should I do next? And I explored a lot of different paths, including joining other large companies, joining other startups that already existed, starting my own business. And then eventually one of my mentors said, well, have you ever thought about acquiring a business? And I never thought that was possible for an individual. I thought that was always something big companies do. Mm-hmm. But eventually I went down this whole path, learned about it, and went through probably over 200 companies in all different industries. And eventually and maybe just to elaborate a little more, after a year and a half of searching, nothing was working out. I even went quite far along in the due diligence process with many businesses. Nothing ended up working out. And then finally, this was in April of 2018, I had received an offer to join this really hot startup in one of the top positions there. And I had a call in the morning to make my final decision on that job. And when I woke up, I had this realization that, okay, I'm still young. I have some level of knowledge or skill. I believe in myself. And if right now I don't take a bet on myself, I don't know if I will again anytime soon. And so I told the CEO on that call that I'm not going to take the job. And I've said to myself, by October of this year, I don't know how, but I'm going to find a business and acquire it and leave Apple by October of this year. And it was quite miraculous. Like I had such a deep intention set at that point. And within 2 weeks, this company that eventually I did acquire came across my table, and things just flowed one after the other. It was actually a distressed business. It had been on decline for a couple of years, but it had a lot of fascinating things going for it. And eventually I acquired it in October of that year. So that was like one of fascinating experiments with, what do you call it?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Was that in 2018?
2018, yeah. Okay,
so let's stop right there. Let's go back to the wireless. I have some questions for you, more detailed. The wireless startup. At the time, were there any other competitors in the market with anything similar? Or were you the only one out there really working on it?
Yeah, actually, this is an interesting thing with technology. There are certain time periods when it becomes relevant to work on a certain product or technology. Like, for example, right now, there's so many people working in AI, and that wasn't the case 6 years ago. Because right now is an interesting, relevant time to work on it. And it was the same thing with wireless charging. There were some companies that 3-4 years prior to us had worked on it. They fizzled away. It wasn't the right time, whether that meant like the electronic components weren't appropriately efficient, or they were too expensive, or whatever else, what didn't exist that needed to exist. And when we started working on it, that seemed to be the perfect time, where now there were 4 or 5 companies working on this. They were all taking a different view at things. Mm-hmm. And our view was a bit unique from what others were doing. But it was just a very perfect time because it was in a lot of people's consciousness. And soon thereafter is when the technology matured and wireless charging actually became a thing.
So timing was very important there.
Yeah, and it just so happened to work in our favor.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then when you took it to market before you got investment, what was that like, trying to describe what your technology did and the adoption of that, those ideas?
Yeah. Well, firstly, our technology, the use case of it evolved so many times. As we were developing the technology, first we thought all kinds of different applications, military or whatever, industrial. And then eventually the market, or at least the interest that we had from customers, was in the consumer electronics space, and specifically for cell phones. So then we started tuning our technology towards that. And we had, by the way, raised money throughout the whole process, like from near the beginning, way before we even had a concrete technology. That you just generally have to do, especially in the hardware space. It's not very cheap to develop hardware versus a software company. You might be able to do it much. And even nowadays, it's much cheaper and faster to do it than even back in 2008 and 2009.
Especially then.
Yeah.
With the recession and everything.
Yeah, exactly. So, it somehow gravitated towards being the right time, the right technology, the right application use case. And that's where Qualcomm, who's very much in the cell phone space, ended up being a very relevant partner.
And that was my next question, is about, convincing investors. What was that adoption like? Did it come pretty quickly? And how did you know to get, who to get in front of to translate that?
Yeah, firstly, this was a bit of a unique case because it's such a rare technology and it's so difficult a technology that not too many people were working on it, or those that were working in it were having a lot of challenges that they weren't able to overcome. And interestingly, Qualcomm themselves were trying to develop a technology in-house and they had failed at it. And that's why they started actually looking outwards. And we had developed partnerships in now I had actually started myself a lot of the partnership work of many people across the ecosystem, from component suppliers all the way up to OEMs, and then people who might use it, like even furniture manufacturers. And so we're building up a whole ecosystem. And there were different people who were, because the technology was so difficult and so few people were able to have success in developing something interesting, then it made our job a bit easier. That's a bit different than if you're in a highly competitive space and you have a technology or a product or service that's not highly differentiated. Now you have to look at things very differently. But in that case, that was a very kind of unique situation, which many people may not actually have the luxury of.
Right. Okay, let's fast forward then to Apple, your days at Apple. I thought it was interesting you talking about culture. You learned a lot about culture, but you didn't specify if it was a positive or negative thing that you learned. Did you learn what to do or what not to do?
I think both aspects. And that's that is also very much a personal preference. There's certain aspects of, like, for example, Apple is one of those places where it's a bit like Grand Central Station in New York, where a lot of the top people in the world come through and then eventually they'll go off in different ways. Mm-hmm. And Apple was like that. You got to see amazing leaders. Many of them had characteristics that I really liked, and after observing them, I really liked. And many of them had characteristics that I thought maybe didn't suit me or how I would want to be as a leader. But it was nice that I could observe all of that in one place. I could observe a lot of characteristics that I liked and didn't like, and I started to see which of those I wanted in myself, or even within my own team. And same with culture. Culture, I kind of define it, and I'd learned some of this from Apple and then kind of morphed it in my own ways. But I define it as two components. One is values and the other is behaviors. And when you have a strong culture, I'll just define that in a second, but when you have a strong culture, for me, that means, like, if I am not in a meeting where my team members are in that meeting, I know how my team members will think or make decisions without me having to be there, because the culture is so strong. And values are, let's say, you'll want to define for your culture a set of values, maybe 3 to 5 values that are relevant given what the current state of the business is and what you think in the next year or two you might need. So maybe a value might be teamwork. And then now for each of those values, you'd want to define a set of behaviors that exemplify what that value is. So for teamwork, it might be that if I observe somebody in my team who's working on something that I have knowledge on, without them asking, I'll go off and offer my assistance to help in their success. So I'm not just thinking about my success, but I'm actually thinking about my teammates' success. And that could be one behavior that defines that value. So, just starting off with defining culture with values and behaviors, and then now taking that and imbibing it into all kinds of processes and practical means or mechanisms throughout your day, whether that's in team meetings, whether that's even incorporating into performance review and compensation. If people are good torchbearers of culture, then that might actually impact their compensation, or imbibing it into your weekly statuses, or acknowledging, when you acknowledge team members, you actually say, oh, I really observed how you did XYZ and how that aligns with this value or behavior that we have in the team. So, like that, how so much of the culture now permeates through your day-to-day activities. So then now, and of course, along with that, you have to be, as a leader, you have to be the first person to model what the culture should be.
Sure. Yep. So what kind of example comes to mind to illustrate this more, clearly?
What in terms of what is culture, or how to bring culture
right, in terms of your approach to culture with values and behavior, how have you seen that play out? I mean, I know you probably have, seen this play out at Apple, and then took this and you basically create your own methodologies out of it. Yeah. So what does that look like practically? Because a lot of founders are thinking, okay, well, how do I do this in my organization?
Yeah. So I can take an example of one of the companies that we're a COO of, fractional COO, and my business scale up exec. It's a fractional COO business, so we actually dive in hands-on into different businesses to help with their scaling. So one of the businesses that I myself have been a fractional COO of and still am is a commercial real estate business, and they had grown quite significantly and then hit a plateau, and they had been at that plateau for some time, and then they wanted some help to figure out how to get to the next level. And when I came into the business, I started really trying to analyze a lot of the different aspects of the business, and there was many different gaps that I observed, but one of them was around culture. There was no clear culture that existed, and that meant a few different things. One is that the founder was very hands-on every single day with every person's tasks, and was very involved in helping them make decisions on what they should even work on every day. So one of the ways that we recreated the whole culture and implemented it, and did it in a few different ways. One of them was to first understand, where do we want to get to? And this actually starts first from what the founder's own personal vision of how his personal life intersects with his business life. I think it's very important. Many founders and entrepreneurs, they only think about their business life. They don't think about how that connects with their personal life or and some founders, they have, most founders say that they want growth in their business. But the reality is that some of them want growth. Some of them actually want a lifestyle business, one that maybe is steady and supports their income needs or whatever else. And that's totally okay. So I think first thing is to understand what is really and you have to be honest with yourself. What is your ambition with your business? What is your vision for your business, and how that intersects with your personal life? And that may change over time. Let's say you have a life event that happens, you have a kid, or you get married or whatever else. It's totally fine for that vision for your business to change. And now if it changes, just be honest with that. And then now implement whatever needs to be implemented in the business to help support that.
Gotcha.
So in this case, this founder was deeply motivated by growth. And that's why when this business had plateaued, he was feeling a lot of anxiety. He was feeling a lower self-worth. And so it does impact, our business is so deeply connected to our emotions and our feelings. And so it's important that all of this is thought through and worked through, not just in terms of metrics and KPIs and blah, blah, but it also should be the soft stuff of how this all intersects with our personal life. So I first spent quite a bit of time really trying to understand honestly what his goals were and what his visions were. And he was willing to, when there's growth that you really want in a business, you have to be willing to do a lot more. It takes a lot more of you to grow a business versus having a stable, steady lifestyle business. And he was willing to put in that investment of personal time and emotions and money and whatever else it would need. So that was good to have that clarity. Now we boil that down into annual vision and quarterly vision. So this is something that happens in a lot of different businesses, but not many do it really well or spend enough time as is needed to do this well. And a lot of businesses, when they're on a inflection, like they're trying to work across an inflection point or they're at a plateau, I often find thinking about 3-year goals or 5-year goals is irrelevant. It's more important to think about much nearer term. What should I be doing today, tomorrow, day after? Not what I should be doing 3 years from now, because in 3 years, the whole market landscape might change. The whole scenario of what you're offering might change. Your services or products that you're offering might need to change. So a lot of times it's more relevant to think, for me, in the nearer term, like the next quarter. And so we took a little bit of time thinking about the year. Then we really dived deep into the next quarter. And at that time, I realized like his whole team that was existing was not supportive of this growth mindset that he wanted to have. And so now that has to boil into, firstly, the type of team members that you have, what their ambitions are, have to align with the company's ambitions. And then now the culture that you start building on top of that team has to also align with what the ambition is of the company. And so we started thinking about our quarterly goals, and we started thinking about our values and behaviors, and trying to understand what are the set of values that are really going to help us get to our quarterly goal and eventually our annual vision. And once we spent a lot of time working on defining those values, and then what are those behaviors. Like, for example, I gave you that teamwork as a potential value, but the way teamwork is defined could be very different for a lot of different companies. So that's where the behaviors really help in understanding how we want to define teamwork. So we spent a lot of time after defining values, defining behaviors. Then now we started thinking of how do we want to practically permeate this throughout this organization. And in that case, because I realized that a lot of the team members weren't conducive, or it didn't match their needs, their own personal needs, what the company needs were. And so we actually had to do a painful switch out of a lot of people, and rehiring new folks who had that personal connection to this ambition of the business. Mm-hmm. And I actually went through that in that distressed business that I'd acquired myself. The first year and a half I spent in just trying to help change the existing team's mindset to a new culture that I wanted to put in. And I realized I was actually doing a disservice to them, because that's not what they had signed up for when they originally joined the company. So I also at that time went through a big set of swapping the team out. So in this case, we ended up doing the same thing and now brought in a fresh set of people. It's not something that I wish for many companies to have to do, but sometimes you realize that it is needed. And then we started developing a plan for bi-weekly team meetings, one-on-ones, weekly statuses, and in each of these, as well as performance reviews, annual performance reviews. And now for each of these, we started thinking, what are the different mechanisms we could inbuild to help grow the culture and talk about the culture and reaffirm the culture. So we even do things like in every team meeting, we start off with acknowledgements. And so this is a forum where, like, for 5 minutes, anybody can acknowledge either themselves or others in the team. And when they acknowledge, they try and tie it back into one of the cultural values or behaviors. And so it starts reaffirming more and more. And then in one-on-ones, we have like different structures that we use to give feedback. And in that feedback, when we give that feedback, we always try and tie it into a cultural value. Like, I observed that that you did an activity in a certain way, and that didn't align with our behavior of XYZ. When we do it next time, do you think it's possible to do it in this other way, which might align it better? Or do you have any suggestions on how it could align better with that behavior? So we start really incorporating culture, values, and behaviors through a lot of different mechanisms. And eventually in performance reviews, we actually have two components to performance reviews. One component is goal focused. So did you achieve the goals that you were going after? And the second is purely values and behaviors focused. So for that second half, we actually take a poll. We do like blind feedback from peers of every team member, and they rate each other on somebody's alignment to different values and behaviors, and actually say whether, give examples of how this person actually showcased that value or behavior. And then now that all ties into the compensation. And so, that when things tie into compensation, it also helps make a culture much stronger.
So did you create a homegrown type of system that you deployed, or both for your company and the client, or did you use something like EOS?
I'm not a big fan of using a one-size-fits-all solution in pretty much most scenarios. I find that EOS has many amazing strong points, and I found them to be quite effective. Many of those strong points to be quite effective in many scenarios, and also not effective in other scenarios. Mm-hmm. And so I usually like to pick and choose what I think is relevant to the given context of a business, rather than just saying, okay, here's EOS, let's implement it. Like, we have several customers right now that are on EOS, And it's actually, I think, a detriment. And so we've been trying to morph some of the things in there to what's actually relevant to that context.
So I find it interesting that you would go into the commercial real estate client as a fractional COO and start with something like vision and more of a strategic approach and spend so much time on that before you get the systems and processes. I think it's brilliant. I mean, I think it's the way, but where did that come from? I mean, I would think that someone hiring a fractional COO would be looking for someone to dive in the systems and processes pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, firstly, it depends on the appetite of the founder or CEO. So not every founder or CEO is interested in, even if I give or my team members give the suggestion, a strong suggestion to start working on strategic areas. Some of them may actually want just quick results on a specific project, and that's fine. In this case, after talking with that founder and giving him recommendations based on what I'd observed as being gaps in the company, and my own experience of how if you do start thinking strategically first, then everything else becomes easier. Like, for example, now when we get into performance review time, everything is so much easier because you already have this framework developed of culture. When you don't have that framework, now it actually ends up taking a lot more time and effort on every single individual piece for you to figure it out on the spot. Versus if you come up with all the right frameworks right from the get-go. So I've just seen it might take more time initially, but eventually it gives more cohesion and it speeds things up later on.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so if we look back at the timeline that you gave us, we stopped at 2018, and that's where you had acquired, you decided to bet on yourself and acquire another company or acquire a company. And take us through that whole train of thought. And I assume that's not the company you're running right now, right? That's the one.
Correct.
Previous. Yeah. So take us through 2018, I think, to 2023.
Yeah. So when I acquired that business, I had in my mind right from the get-go that within 4 to 5 years, I want to turn this business around, grow it, and exit. And because I had that time frame in mind, I started right from the beginning with trying to optimize based on what my end goal was. So I knew who could be a potential acquirer and what would they be looking for in a business like mine. So they'd be looking for, in this case, it was an e-commerce business that was a direct to consumer. So they'd be looking for most likely EBITDA, and valuing the business based on EBITDA and like a steadily, hopefully growing EBITDA. And secondly, that there was some unique moat that we had. And this business was focused in the vegan space, and veganism is something that really connects with me personally. I've been a long time vegan. And so within that, there's a really niche audience. And now if we can really capture that audience and have really deep, meaningful connection with them, and that audience being sizable, then that also could be something of value to a potential acquirer. So these are things that now I started right from the beginning, focusing a lot of my time and effort on. And then, of course, all the other things like corporate structuring, so that eventually it's structured appropriately when it does get the selling time, that, tax-wise, it's reasonable and whatever else. Sure. So I ended up thinking through a lot of these different things. Now, in terms of culture, when I joined, I just briefly mentioned, when I joined that business, there was a set of team that already came with it. The business was previously a lifestyle business. I wanted to change it to a growth-oriented business because I realized very quickly that everybody in the team, they were basically copy pasting what they did month over month. They weren't thinking of, well, how do I make this more efficient? Or are there new ideas or new ways of approaching things? Mm-hmm. And when there's that culture of stagnation, that eventually will flow into how the company operates, and then the revenues eventually will get impacted similarly. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that any company that doesn't innovate will eventually die. And
now, just for context, what kind of business was this?
This was a monthly subscription for snack and beauty products in the vegan space.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then how did you do that? How did you come in and take it from sort of a small operation, lifestyle business to growth oriented?
Yeah. So first year and a half was very painful. I didn't think about growth. I actually thought about team and culture and how to update that team and culture. And it was very difficult because I eventually realized that I couldn't change. That's not what they signed up for. And so it wasn't possible to change somebody's mindset or desire for how their work connects with their personal life.
Mm-hmm.
And I would actually be doing a disservice to them by trying to make them work in a culture that didn't align with what they wanted personally.
Right.
And after that year and a half, one day I finally made the decision, this is not working. And I've tried my honest best to change this culture without letting go of people. And it's not the right decision because now the business is suffering. And that's when I realized that actually when businesses say that our team is first, I think actually business needs to be first and team can be a close second. If the business is not going in the right trajectory, then it'll end up impacting everybody, including the team.
Yeah.
And so it's important that decisions are made, at least from my view, firstly for the business, and then a close second can be for the team.
Agreed.
And so that's where I ended up replacing 95% of the team. It was a very painful decision. And it's not something that I had all wanted, but after I did it and I brought on a new team, which right from the get-go knew what they were getting into, I realized that I should have done this much earlier. It would have allowed us to go in the right direction much faster. And that's when I had this new team with this new culture already. That's when things started going the right trajectory. And then a lot of different ideas came through it that everybody brought to the table. Like, for example, we were previously working like a regular retailer where you buy product at a wholesale price and then you sell it to customers at a higher price and you make that margin. Eventually we realized, we've already been building up a community of vegans, and both on social and through email. And eventually we started putting a lot more attention on building that community, and it became over 500,000 people. And then now that gave us some leverage to now, instead of being a regular retailer, why don't we shift to becoming more of a marketing company for brands? So now if a vegan brand wants to get their product into the hands of a relevant audience, they can distribute it through us as a sample rather than, and so now we went from having like 50% gross margins to except shipping and packaging and fulfillment, our product was free. So our margins like completely changed very quickly as we made that shift. So, things like that ended up coming into the pipeline now that we had the right team in place.
Yeah, that's amazing. And all such great wisdom from being on the front line. So very much appreciated. As we move into like the last probably third of this conversation, take us now into what you're doing today. What's the company look like? Let's talk about culture. What do you deliver? What do your clients look like? All of that.
Yeah. One thing I realized through a lot of my experiences is that I had many advisors, and for much of the time, advice was very helpful to have. But eventually, it always got to the phase where my to-do list, every time I met with an advisor, just got longer and longer and longer. And then I wasn't able to get through actually executing on things, or either I didn't have time or I didn't have the right skills to execute on many of the ideas. Like maybe at a high level, I thought, okay, yeah, this makes sense. But then now when I got to the nitty gritty, I realized, it'd be a big learning curve for me to try and figure this out. And that's when I thought that it's actually relevant to have not just advisors, but people who can roll up their sleeve and do the work. And they actually have the skill set to do the work. And in 2023, after this last business was acquired, a couple of business owners I knew, they actually reached out to me and said, hey, our businesses have plateaued, and can you come in and help us? And so actually, that's when I started working as a fractional CEO myself. And I realized these businesses, their founders, they had hit a skill set ceiling. Their teams were burnt out. They had been plateaued for quite some time. And I retooled a lot of their businesses. And within 3-4 months, their revenues grew 30-40%. And it was quite fascinating just to see the type of impact you can have and how quickly you can have it when you're able to just bring in some of your own experience that you've had through the years. Yeah. And because of that success, I ended up having more engagements than I could handle myself. And that's when Scale Up Exec was born. And it's been about a year and just over a year, or now almost a year and a half, that Scale Up Exec has been around. And it's a small team. There's about 8 of us on the team right now. But these are like the COOs that are the gems that I've come across after meeting hundreds of them through the years. So they're the folks that have scaled businesses from 0 to 8, 9 figures and gotten them to exits and They've also been execs at large enterprises, and they've proven themselves again and again in a lot of different contexts, in many different industries. And so we're jumping into small and medium-sized businesses and helping them not just strategically, but hands-on with growth.
So, I mean, it sounds very unique, the setup you have, because that was really my next question was going to, okay, well, who are you hiring that could deliver with a client like you deliver, because you have the firsthand experience. And so it'd be really difficult to translate what you know to other people to take in sort of a, packaged way. So what makes someone who has a track record like these other folks do want to do this type of work?
Yeah. Firstly, most of the people in my team don't have to work.
Okay, and that's even more to the point of like, why would they choose this work, consulting work?
The interesting thing is, once you've gained a bunch of experience or knowledge, or you figured out some things, there's almost a natural, not for everybody, but for many people, there's a natural sense that you have that you want to be able to help others or share your knowledge or experiences with others in some way or the other. And for a lot of these folks, if they were to work in a company again, it would most likely be either a really fast growing business that has a lot of potential, or it would be in a really large company where compensation would, still be relatively interesting. But now with the fractional case, there's kind of this interesting opportunity for them where compensation works out because they're working for 3-4 different clients at the same time. And then there's this when you're working for multiple contexts, multiple different businesses and different industries, there's like this high that you get when you're able to very quickly come in and make a difference to them.
Sure.
And that's much different than if you're just working in one business, one context. And especially if it's a large business, which has a different time lag in allowing things to happen, versus a smaller, medium-sized business where you can very quickly make a big dent. So it's kind of an exhilarating experience for them. And most of these folks are not doing it just for the money. They're actually doing it because maybe that satisfaction that you get, or that you can actually bring some real benefit to people's jobs and employment, and just the business world.
Yeah, that still sounds very unique, because it doesn't sound like you would be able to build very many of these types of companies, because there's not that many people out there that fit that profile where they've got the background, so they've got the wisdom, they want to deploy it in a way that is curated and maybe more complicated, and they're not after retirement or actually trying to get another exit. It seems so then therefore it makes me wonder, what does the future look like for you in this company? I mean, you've had a couple exits, or maybe more. What is that the plan for this company?
Yeah, actually, this is a bit different. I think I might have mentioned to you last time we spoke, but I'm actually approaching this business a bit differently than I have in the past, and even how I approach many of our customers. In this context, I'm not thinking about the future at all. I'm very much focused on the present, and I'm trying to remove any concept of goals, ambition, and instead really trying to be so present and do the best I can at this moment. So in this way, let's say the business does well, or let's say it doesn't do well, or whatever ends up happening, I'm going to be even keeled through it. So for me now, I think it's much more important. And I've even realized through a lot of the very challenging situations I've been through in the past, that your ability to manage your reactions or your internal space is actually more important than what ends up being the outcome of what you're working through. So for me, it's quite important to see, can I get to a place where nothing outside can impact me? And instead I can just be focused on the stability that is inside, and just keeping attached to that stability inside, rather than pitching my stability on something external. Things outside in the world will always go up and down. But if you can instead pitch your mind, you can pitch your emotions, your reactions to some stable place inside, then I think that's something worth achieving in this lifetime.
I agree 100%. It's very, very philosophical approach that I agree. but I have to beg the question of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And so it's like, maybe there's something I'm missing. But if I, from an outsider, I look back at your track record and say, it served you pretty well, right? To have these 4 or 5 year goals and you hit them, and you did what you said you were going to do, and things may have been up and down in the journey, because that's how it goes, but all is well. So why switch away from a goal driven approach and to more of a present nature approach?
It's an experiment. I am always experimenting with things.
I love it.
And fascinating thing is, now in this just over a year, without trying, like, the business has grown very fast. It's probably one of the fastest growing, it is the fastest growing business I've had so far. It is highly profitable. We recently won this 100 for 2024, 100 most promising companies of 2024 award. And I just, like, 2 months ago, won a number one CEO in the fractional industry award. And so, like, these things, you can't plan for it. Yeah. But it's happening. Positive things are happening here without goals in place. So I definitely still put plans in terms of, okay, this week I'm going to focus on this. Or I do look at data deeply and say, okay, this is working, this is not working. So I'm still trying my best, and I'm still regimented with my use of time. So, like, in certain hours of the day, I'm going to get certain things accomplished. But in terms of where the business is heading to, I don't know what it's going to look like. And but either way, I'm going to try my best. I'm not going to. It's very easy, if you don't have goals, to slack off and just to not try your best. So That's I think right. It's actually important that first you have to have that foundation, that when you do work on something, you naturally will want to do your best in it. If that foundation is not there, then this is probably not a good bet to take.
Yeah, well, I've found that a lot of people I meet that are very optimization oriented are also experimenters. So it would make sense that, you would take that path, even though it's a philosophical one at first glance. I think experimenting is just another version of how, trying to optimize your life, because how do you optimize through, you can't know what you don't know until you experiment to find it out. So I think that's very fascinating. And very interesting. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's just oozing with wisdom, and that's what I go for here, is try to give my audience practical wisdom. I think that I could watch this 2 or 3 times back and learn something new. So thank you very much.
Oh yeah, nice questions. I appreciate them. It was fun.
Yeah. So where do we send people if they want to know how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, scaleupexec.com. You can actually book some time with me directly. So even if you're not necessarily interested in bringing on somebody, I'm just always available to be a sounding board for people as they're working through their business or through their journeys. So I'm happy to offer my time, so people can book directly time with me from scaleupexec.com. I also have an email newsletter where I share every 1 or 2 weeks. I share some of my insights into entrepreneurship and leadership. And so people can sign up for that from scaleupexec.com as well.
Awesome. Thanks again for being on.
Yeah, thank you.